Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle and this is my final wrap-up for Victober 2022. In this video I want to tell you what I read in the last week of Victober, as well as just do a general wrap-up of the month, my thoughts about Victober 2022. So let's just dive right in. First of all, a huge thank you to the hosts of Victober 2022, Kate Howe, Katie from Books and Things, Marissa from Blatantly Bookish, Petra Yu, and Roz from Scallydandling About the Books. They did such a good job with hosting Victober. They put out such great Victober content. I loved watching all the Victober videos and it really boosted my enjoyment in the month of Victober, for sure. All right, so let's dive into I'm going to do a brief rundown here of the prompts, and if I get to a book that I finished in the last week of the month, then I will just talk about it then. So the group read was The Mayor of Casterbridge by Thomas Hardy. I've already talked about my thoughts on this book. I will link it in the cards here if you want to watch that video. I did enjoy it. I haven't read a ton of Thomas Hardy, but I did enjoy that one. I did not like the main character of Michael Henchard. I honestly, he was the making of his own demise, really. But yeah, but it was a good read, and I did enjoy talking about it on Goodreads with the other people who were reading it. Okay, Kate's prompt was to read a Victorian book with chronic illness or disability representation, and I ended up doing a buddy read of this one with Miriam from Miriam Elizabeth Reads, and that was so much fun. I mean, I would have loved this book anyway, but being able to talk about it with Miriam just really increased my enjoyment of this book. And we read Poor Miss Finch by Wilkie Collins. This was a 5-star read. I loved it so much. It had all of the classic things that you can expect from Wilkie Collins. It had the melodrama, a little bit of sensationalism, although it was toned down a bit because this really was a domestic story, and he lets you know that right from the beginning because he calls this book, hang on a second, I'm looking for the, yes, he even calls it a domestic story, but it still has those elements of melodrama and sensation that I love. It's narrated by Madame Pratolungo, who was my favorite character in the book. She was hilarious. She was so funny. I loved her a lot. There was this German doctor, and I've already forgotten his name, but he was also hilarious. I loved him too. Lucilla Finch's little sister, she was in the book a bit, and I loved her too. Those were my 3 favorite characters in here. I just really enjoyed how he told this story. It involved Lucilla, who is blind, and then she falls in love with a new guy in the neighborhood who has a twin brother, and events ensue, and it was just such an enjoyable read. I marked a couple of things here that I wanted to talk about. I found the notes at the end were quite helpful. I like that they included that. Some things I already knew, but there were, of course, other things that I didn't that was very helpful. And just one more here. Now, I've already read a few things for you in previous videos. I'll be linking to my previous Victober videos here if you haven't seen them. But on thinking it over once more, and after reading the journal again, she's talking about Lucilla's journal, it strikes me as the wiser proceeding to let Lucilla tell the story of her own life at Ramsgate herself, adding notes of my own occasionally where they appear to be required. Variety, freshness, and reality. I believe I shall secure them all 3 by following this plan. Why is history in general? I know there are brilliant exceptions to the rule. Such dull reading. Because it is the narrative of events written at second hand. Now I will be anything else you please, except dull. You may say I have been dull already. As I am an honest woman, I don't agree with you. There are some people who bring dull minds to their reading and then blame the writer for it. I say no more. So yeah, that was just a little glimpse into the narration of Madame Pratolungo. I loved this read. 5 stars. I will definitely read more from Wilkie Collins. I actually want to read everything that he wrote. And I had such a good time talking about it with Miriam. All right, Katie's prompt was to read a coming of age story, and I read Shepard by William Harrison Ainsworth. And this is what is called a Newgate novel. It's a book where the main character is a criminal, essentially. And what I liked about this is that Shepard is a real historical figure, and there were more historical figures included in the story, and so he was kind of like a famous historical thief, well known for being able to escape from jail. And I just really enjoyed this story. Yes, it was melodramatic and sensational, but that's the point. That's the type of story that it was, and I love that. And so it's set in the early 1700s, and it covers a pretty great distance in time. It starts with Shepard being about 9 months old, and then it goes until he is about early 20s, I want to say. And again, yeah, I just really enjoyed it. I liked the characters. I liked the plot. Yeah, I'm a fan of William Harrison Ainsworth. Marissa's prompt was to read a short story collection, and I finished Gothic Tales by Elizabeth Gaskell. I started this last year for Victober, and I finished it this year. The two that I read that I've already talked about were The Crooked Branch and Curious If True, and then the last story in here was called The Grey Woman, and I really liked that story. I thought that was really good. It was set in France and Germany, and what I loved was how it was told. It was a story within a story. We start with people who meet this family, and then they want information about a painting they see on a wall of a woman, and they find out that it is a family member, and and they're given this letter that she wrote, and then the rest of the story is this letter that she wrote. And this one was great because it was very Gothic, and set in a castle with a dubious man, and the main character doesn't really know what he's up to or what he's capable of. And yeah, I really enjoyed that one. So I am proud to say that I finally completed Gothic Tales by Elizabeth Gaskell. Petra's prompt was to read a Victorian work and then watch the adaptation of it. And for this, I read and watched The Mayor of Casterbridge. Like I said already, the book was great. The adaptation was only okay. I loved the cast. Kieran Hines played Michael Henchard. James Purefoy played Farfrae. And then there was a ton of other people that I recognized that I really like as British actors. And so the cast was phenomenal, but the story itself, it was in two parts. It was about 3 hours, but I felt like it just didn't seem to show the advance of time very well. And then they did certain odd things, like, you're supposed to feel for the main character. You're supposed to feel for Michael Henchard. And so sometimes they showed his remorse, but not really. And the time when I really noticed it, when it was the most important, was at the very beginning, after he sells his wife and baby. And, it just went from him selling them to suddenly he's in a church making his vow not to drink again, and it doesn't show, and I think this is a key scene, him waking up, realizing that he got drunk and sold his wife, and then trying to look for her. It didn't do a really good job of showing that. So the adaptation was just okay. I also watched The Moonstone. This is the adaptation from 2017. This was a rewatch for me, but boy, did I love it. I really like this adaptation. It's got a really good cast, and I really like how they tell the story in that adaptation. So that was just a lot of fun. Roz's prompt was to read poetry, and I've already talked about that. in the week 1 video that I did. I don't read a ton of poetry, but I gave it a whirl. Okay, so a few other Victorian things that I read. So that's it. I completed all the prompts, and then I did a few extra things. So I grabbed hunted down the detective stories of Charles Dickens. These are short stories, so these could technically go in with Marissa's prompt. And I haven't completed this book yet, but I've read 100 pages in here, and I'm really enjoying it, and I'm just going to keep going and finish it. I read Nemesis, The Drunkard's Death, and then I've already talked about those two. The 3 that I read in the last week of Victober were The Automaton Police, Modern Science of Thief-Taking, and A Detective Police Party. The Automaton Police, that one was hilarious. It was talking about basically police robots, the possibility of policing being done by robots, and so that was a funny little story to be included in there. The last 2, The Modern Science of Thief-Taking and A Detective Police Party, tell the story of some police are invited to the offices of Household Words. Dickens basically wants them to tell their stories about what it's like to be a police officer, because this detective division was brand new, and so he just got them to tell stories, and so that's what that is their stories of the types of cases that they do. One interesting thing for reading those 2 is that so much, it seems, of that early detective period was about going undercover, and the length of time that they were willing to do it for was also pretty incredible. First of all, a picture I wanted to show you. That is The Automaton Police Office and Real Offenders by George Cruikshank. So I love that they include some original illustrations in here. From the short story, The Modern Science of Thief-Taking, one interesting thing is you really discover through these that Charles Dickens had a real respect and admiration for the detective department, because he was always quite accurate in how he depicted them in these stories. To each division of the force is attached 2 officers who are denominated detectives. The staff, or headquarters, consists of 6 sergeants and 2 inspectors. Thus, the detective police, of which we hear so much, consists of only 42 individuals whose duty it is to wear no uniform and to perform the most difficult operations of their craft. They have not only to counteract the machinations of every sort of rascal, whose only means of existence is avowed rascality, but to clear up family mysteries, the investigation of which demands the utmost delicacy and tact. And then from A Detective Police Party, here's another great illustration. Police officers making an arrest in a London lodging house, and that's an anonymous sketch. So, A Detective Police Party. On the other hand, the detective force organized since the establishment of the existing police is so well chosen and trained, proceeds so systematically and quietly, does its business in such a workmanlike manner, and is always so calmly and steadily engaged in the service of the public, that the public really do not know of it, and know enough of it to know a tithe of its usefulness. Impressed with this conviction and interested in the men themselves, we represented to the authorities of Scotland Yard that we should be glad, if there were no official objection, to have some talk with the detectives. A most obliging and ready permission being given, a certain evening was appointed with a certain inspector for a social conference between ourselves and the detectives at our office in Wellington Street, Strand, London. In consequence of which appointment the party came off, which we are about to describe, and we beg to repeat that, avoiding such topics as it might be for obvious reasons injurious to the public or disagreeable to respectable individuals, to touch upon in print our description is as exact as we can make it. And then I did a buddy read with Donna from Studio in the Library of The Big Bow Mystery by Israel Zangwill. This is thought to be the first full-length locked room novel, and this was really fun to read. A woman keeps a lodging house, and she can't seem to wake her lodger. His door is locked. She goes across the street to a retired detective from Scotland Yard, and he comes to help her. They break the door in and discover this man dead in bed, his throat's cut, and the door's been locked from the inside, and all the windows are locked and sealed. And so the investigation ensues, and I just thought that it was just really entertaining. So here's the beginning. On a memorable morning of early December, London opened its eyes on a frigid grey mist. There are mornings when King Fog masses his molecules of carbon in serried squadrons in the city, while he scatters them tenuously in the suburbs so that your morning train may bear you from twilight to darkness. But today, the enemy's maneuvering was more monotonous. From Bow even unto Hammersmith there draggled a dull, wretched vapour, like the wraith of an impecunious suicide come into a fortune immediately after the fatal deed. The barometers and thermometers had sympathetically shared its depression, and their spirits, when they had any, were low. The cold cut like a many-bladed knife. I thought this was unexpectedly humorous. There was also like a lot of detail about the inquest and the trial, as well as what the newspapers were saying. So that is The Big Bow Mystery by Israel Zangwill. And there you have it. That is my Victober 2022. I had a great time. I read some really great books. I had some great buddy reads, and I watched some great booktube videos about Victorian literature, and it was just a lot of fun. So thank you again to the hosts. Let me know in the comment section down below if you've read any of these books that I talked about. I would love to chat about them with you. And were you able to watch an adaptation over the month? And if so, what did you think about it? It's interesting with adaptations. Sometimes they're really on the nose and sometimes they're not. So let's have a chat about that. And I will see you for another video soon. Bye.